Canada is repatriating more women and children from a Syrian detention camp used to house suspected ISIS militants and supporters. It's a contentious issue and one that, as you just heard there, the Prime Minister is not commenting too much on. So what's at stake for the government in the process of bringing these families home? Let's bring in the front bench panel to talk about that. With me this evening, former Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil. He's now a strategic business advisor for the law firm Cox & Palmer in Halifax. Former Alberta MLA and Cabinet Minister Gary Mar is with us. He's the president and CEO of the Canada West Foundation. Former communications director to Jagmeet Singh, Melanie Richer, is here as well. She now works at Earnscliffe Strategies. And CTV National News Ottawa Bureau Chief Joyce Napier is next to me here in studio. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks so much for making the time for this discussion. Joyce, I'll start with you. This is such a migration for the federal government. Years ago, I remember when Ralph Goodale was public safety minister, he was like, nope, not going to happen. We don't have the resources. It's not safe. We don't have any consular presence. And by the way, these people went over there voluntarily when we warned them not to. And, you know, many of them are ISIS support. You know, we suspect are ISIS supporters. Now they're bringing them home.
Well, you know, all this is true. You know, were their intentions, you know, good when they left? Were they sympathizers, perhaps? Look, there's all sorts of things we can say. They are, at the end of the day, Canadian citizens, and they are entitled to the protections of the Charter. If we pick and choose who we should protect and who we should defend, then our system breaks down. So therefore, they're Canadian citizens. Bring them back, try them here. If evidence will be very difficult, I understand all the legal difficulties that this has. There are also a lot of political implications and difficulties for this government. I suspect they did this they were reticent in doing this. They were pushed by a lawyer, basically, and by lawyers to do the right thing. That is the right thing. It is politically very difficult because they are repatriating people that a lot of Canadians may think are terrorists. We should leave them there. I'm sure there is that floating out there. But I'll remind you of Omar Khadr, who spent, what, 10 years in Guantanamo. He was one of the last prisoners to finally leave Guantanamo because the Canadian government dragged its feet to the point where after George W. Bush left office and Barack Obama took over and he wanted to empty Guantanamo, which was a bit of a shameful thing, he was begging the Canadians, just please take him back home and then deal with him as you must and as you will. So Canadians have a history of sort of letting these cases drag, you know, I think that they should take on the political risk and do the right thing.
I think that Joyce, Gary, you know, correctly there talks about the risk associated with it politically, right? It's one of those difficult things where it's like, you understand the legal implications, the moral implications, but at the same time, I can also understand how the Canadian public would be really uncomfortable with the whole idea of this happening, especially when, even though you can charge them here, it's very difficult to collect evidence, and the bar for proving that it is very high. How difficult of a kind of balancing act for the government do you think that is and has been?
Well, I would ask other Canadians to think about, if you were in trouble in another part of the world, would you want the Canadian government to respect the fact that you are a Canadian citizen and do things to get you back to Canada? And you have a right of entry as a Canadian citizen. So I agree with Joyce. The first thing to note is that these are Canadian citizens. Now, I think there is a political cost that will, you know, be paid in order to do the right thing. But that's what government should do. In order to do the right thing, you need to be able to sometimes use your political capital to do the right thing. And one of the explanations that I think needs to be done with the federal government is, why are you looking at security checks on children? I mean, even for non-Canadian children, we don't do security checks that I'm aware of. And you're talking about doing security checks for children that are Canadian citizens wanting to return back to Canada. I mean, that's something that has not yet been explained by the Prime Minister or anybody else as to why you would do that. But it does strike me that, yes, there is a political price to be paid, but that's what government should do in order to ensure that, you know, as Joyce says, they're doing the right thing.
And I wonder if you can mitigate, Stephen, some of that risk when it's, safe to do so and you're not compromising security by maybe explaining what's going on, being more forthright with Canadians kind of about what held you back in the first place, what you're able to do now, what your intentions are as far as, prosecuting people, if that is in fact going to be the case. Like, there's just no transparency around this at all right now.
Well, part of the challenge is it's been 2 years. There's been a lot of time that has gone by where they could have been using that to educate Canadians on the fact that these Canadians are like all of us, have a right to return to their country. And as Joyce and Gary both said, it's the right thing to do. I have to believe there's always extremes on every issue, but the moderate middle, which is where most Canadians are, will come to realize that these Canadian citizens, have a right to come home. What we do with them after that's another story. But I'm saddened by the fact when I listen to news stories when you hear about a mother who may not be coming home and children have a right to come home. That's not Canadian. Whatever the issue may be associated with, that's not how Canadians act. And there are a lot of young Canadians, as Gary said, children who are in horrible conditions. We should be bringing them home and dealing with them here in Canada, whatever the outcome of that would be. But, it was not long ago we were mocking the Americans for separating women and children at the southern border. This is not a good look for Canada, in my view.
I wonder also if there's a bit more kind of political vulnerability, just Melanie, because of the point that Stephen makes that it's a few years in, right? And that ultimately, as Joyce says, it was lawyers. It was a federal court decision, an impending decision the next day that kind of forced the government's hand rather than them saying, okay, look, we've come to this conclusion. We're going to do this because, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, as we've heard from the Prime Minister say in other instances. Instead, it was kind of like their hand was forced, which might make it more difficult to defend now.
Totally. I agree with everybody so far. And I won't pretend that this is an easy situation, and it does need a fair amount of balance. You want to ensure public safety, but at the end of the day, these folks are Canadians, and I really quite liked Gary's point about, if you got into trouble and you were abroad, wouldn't you want your government to do everything they could to bring you home? The political aspect of it, and I know, in Ottawa right now, the temperature is high on other issues, and that's probably one of the considerations of how will this be used. But to everybody's point, it shouldn't matter. The fact that it took the federal court to say you have a responsibility, you need to do this, and not only had that spurred them into action, but they've actually appealed to say, no, you've overstepped. That's a little bit heartbreaking when you think about it, because for the majority, these are kids. These are kids who are being detained in really terrible conditions. And if this was your neighbor, you'd do everything to help them. So the fact that it's taken so long, it's taken years, is heartbreaking. While not easy, like everybody has mentioned, something that absolutely needs to be done, and needs to be done quickly.
I'll quickly just add the caveat that my understanding is that the feds are appealing the portion of the ruling that applies to the men who were there,
yes, you're right.
Not necessarily the kids. And I do remember, to Ralph Goodell's credit, for if I remember those interviews, he did make a clear distinction between the kids and the women and the adults. But I do take your point that obviously it's not like they brought those kids home 2 years ago right away. So I'm going to take a quick break. The front bench panel is sticking around on the other end of that break. We're going to talk about the political consequences of the dream of home ownership evaporating for many Canadians. Stay right there.